And welcome back. Well, you can see that we're in the cab of our project truck, our 2012 Red Ram, otherwise known as Candy Apple. And it's been a little while since our last video, and we'll give you more of an update, or I should say I'll go over and give you more of an update of the status of our project truck more towards the end. But in this video, what we're looking at doing is replacing the steering wheel. This is something I've commented on in a few videos, and you can see that this is the original 2012 steering wheel. And just due to time and age and exposure to UV, the vinyl on this steering wheel, as you can see, is starting to get pretty pitted and basically starting to kind of flake and come apart. So just found this aftermarket steering wheel on eBay, and it's listed as working with our particular year and trim level and model of truck. And so far, from what I can see here, now these are our airbag attachment points, look to be matching up to what we need, but we'll see here in a moment, obviously, whether this steering wheel will work correctly. Now, I did email the seller per their requirements a picture of the steering wheel, let them know we did not have paddle shifters, and we also did not have steering wheel audio controls in the back of this, and we also on this steering wheel do not have heated steering wheel on this one. Now this is quote-unquote, I use air quotes, carbon fiber, so take that with what you will, but not a bad looking steering wheel, and I'm not really concerned with the carbon fiber, to be honest with you. Now this is a flat steering wheel here on the bottom, which comes in handy. You can see, as well as you've got actual grip points on the bottom, little divots you can put your hands into, as well as on the sides you've got the divots here that you can grip around with your thumb versus what we have here. Now, it's not a dig on the factory steering wheel any stretch of the imagination. This will definitely get the job done, but considering we're looking at taking this thing on track events, you know, having something here where this is a bit more agronomic, where we can really grab a hold of this steering wheel if we need and will, then that's you know, it's a plus to have. So with that being said, you can see that again, it's got the kind of the carbon fiber supposedly top and bottom. It is also a flat bottom, as I mentioned earlier, which, you know, helps you, keeps you from having to raise up or raise down your seat to adjust in and out and get out of the vehicle without hitting the bottom of the steering wheel, which I tend to do. Let's see. So other than that, like I said, it looks like it'll be a matching piece. And while we're at it, we're going to be replacing, or trying to replace, that shifter boot that you see there, which is all cracked and broken. And we got an actual Mopar part number for that shifter boot that you see here. So the first thing we need to do, since we know we need to get access into being able to either potentially remove this shifter lever, is I'm going to work on getting the housing separated for the rear trim here. That'll also give us the ability to more easily get into our airbag release pins, hopefully without having to rotate the steering wheel, but if we have to, we'll obviously start the truck and just rotate the steering wheel to get behind it. Now I'll try to get a shot in here. I've got an inspection mirror ready to go, but this is the tool. I'll put a link in the description below. I got this off Amazon, and it works really well for being able to get inside of the little metal loops for the airbag, being able to pry them off of and around these little catches here to get the airbag to release. So I haven't disconnected the battery yet, because I just want to see if I can get this plastic clamshell off the back here. And obviously, before we do anything with this airbag, even as far as releasing it, then we'll disconnect the battery. Yeah, as you can see, you can kind of turn the steering wheel a little bit left or right with it being turned off. And what we may have to do is just take this top cover off, start the truck, turn the steering wheel so it's straight up, at least pop the bottom one free, put our steering wheel back straight, and then disconnect our battery at that point. But what I'm going to do to make this easier is I'm just going to take off this bottom trim piece that you see here, which you've seen me do this before. There's a Phillips screw here as well as here, and then this whole thing will just kind of pull forward and release with some pins. So let me go ahead and get these two bottom screws out, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So I just want to show you the back side of that panel there. You can see our little plastic retaining clips. You just pull this forward after releasing these two bottom Phillips screws, and this will come free. Now be careful, because it does have the OBD port in it, so you don't want to stretch out that wiring too much. So what you can do is just grab the OBD2 port, and let's see if I can do it from this side. No, I can't do it from that side, but there's a couple of releases here that we can push on the sides, which I will do, and that will allow us to, there it goes. You can see there on the, hopefully you can see that one pop out there, and we'll remove that one. Okay, there we go. Now we're out. So you can see the releases on top of that, and that just allows this panel to kind of fall down, get it more out of your way, as well as not putting any stress on your diagnostic connector wires. Now on the steering wheel itself, it looks like we've got access to a screw through here, as well as on the other side. And if I remember correctly, those are Torx fasteners. And I'm gonna go get my Torx set, and I'll bring you back, and I'll let you know what size torque that was. So one moment. And welcome back. So we just took those two fasteners out. They're on the bottom of our steering wheel. They're on the left and right hand sides, up inside these little channels. And they are, to confirm, T15 Torx, at least on this make, model, and Ram. They're T15 Torx. And with those two removed, we should be able to just kind of manipulate our cover here. Get our top cover out, or top trim cover out, however you want to call it. And then we'll, yep, we got a good view, or good access now to the top left and right release pins. And the question is whether we can get this bottom, I don't think we're going to be able to get the bottom cover out of here. Feels like there's still a fastener holding the bottom cover on, possibly through here or here, as well as is that the steering wheel adjustment arm, which there may be a way to release this, or just to get this to come off its pivot, but we don't necessarily need the bottom cover to come off to do what we need to do. Like I said, we can start the truck temporarily just to rotate the steering wheel up, get behind it and release that bottom one, the bottom airbag to release, rotate it, straighten our steering wheel back up, and then get our top two out. And then obviously before we remove the airbag itself, we'll get the battery disconnected. But I'm also looking at our shift linkage here to see how difficult that either is or isn't going to be to get that shift lever off of here to replace that boot. Looks like if you can just, it's easy enough to get it off the trim. But remember, we also have an electrical wire that runs through here for the plus and minus, which is when you're in quote-unquote manual mode in the transmission, and you want to step through your gears your own rather than the ECU shifting for you. Okay, so when we get the steering wheel out of the way, we'll kind of have a better look as to what's going on here. The all data repair manual didn't really say all that much, other than, I don't know if you can see it here, we've got the one fastener here, which this shifter arm kind of makes up this entire assembly. This is where you've got your physical cable back here that then eventually routes its way down to the transmission. So I was hoping there was a way to get this out of here or replace this boot without having to pull this entire shifter out. Now, if that's what it takes, to be honest with you, I may not replace that boot because I really don't want to have to play around with this shifter assembly to get this out of here. Like I said, we'll have to look at it more once we're in there to see what the difficulty is going to be, because this is a bit too big in diameter to get that shift boot to kind of slide over this way and then slide into place. And I don't see a way to necessarily take just this end piece off of here because of the electrical connection that's on it. By the way, I'm rambling too much. The primary thing we want to do today is see about getting this steering wheel replaced and out of here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the truck and rotate our steering wheel up, get this bottom latch to unlatch, and then re-straighten our steering wheel and then disconnect our battery. Once that's done, I'll bring you back and then I'll get you set up with an inspection mirror, and then we'll take care of the two on the top corners here, and I'll kind of hopefully get you in there where you can see that, where you can see what I'm gonna use this little tool here for, to get those loops to release on that airbag. So one moment. And welcome back. So you can see we started the vehicle long enough just to get the steering wheel to point straight up. I'm not going to be able to show you this very well because trying to get a light and an inspection mirror and the camera in here, and I'll bring you back and I'll show you like one of the two side ones, but the process is the same. But when you've got the steering wheel straight up like this, there's going to be an access hole. Maybe I can show you that right here at the bottom, and inside of there, you may not be able to see it here, is going to be a little wire loop that we're going to use our tool to get underneath this tool here, to get underneath and kind of lift up on that spring until this bottom one releases. Now I may not be able to show you the actual action again. I'll try to show you one of the top corner ones to show you what I'm referring to, but I may be able to, hopefully we can hear and see this thing pop free once we get this tab off of here. Yeah, I'm on it. There it went. Oh, almost. Looks like it caught back, but that's all we're doing. We're just taking our tool, getting it onto our spring. There it goes. Okay, it just went. So you can see the bottom of our airbag is now pop free. So what I'm going to do is start the truck, straighten our wheel up so we can get their two corner ones. But before I finish releasing this all the way, I'm also going to go ahead and disconnect the battery, just so that we don't have any accidental discharges with this airbag. And when I bring you back, like I said, I'm going to try to get a camera angle in here so you can see one of these two top ones release. So one moment. And welcome back. So you can see that we got our steering wheel rotated back around. We've got our bottom fastener free. You saw us do that in the previous clip. We're just looking on the upper left and right, and I've tried several different ways of trying to get an inspection mirror in here and zoom the camera in on it, and it's just really just not enough room, and it's kind of hard to see it. But all we're going to do is continue to use our tool that you see here before to get underneath that loop, lever it up, to get it past the catch, and the airbag will pop off. And when we get this airbag the rest of the way out, I'll go through it and show you a little bit more detail exactly what we were doing here. So let me get to work on getting these two upper clasps pop free, and I'll bring you back in one moment. And welcome back. So you can see we got our 3 tabs for our airbag released. You can see them there. And all that tool is doing, it's depending on which one you're grabbing hold of at the time, but you're grabbing this loop and you're just pushing it out of the way, basically lifting it up and over those 3 tabs that you see there. Now this particular airbag also has a Christmas tree clip that holds the wiring to the airbag module itself, so we just want to be careful we don't stress the wiring out. And on this particular model, it's easier just to kind of flip the airbag straight up. Now these got the older type connectors on it. You'll notice there's no orange bar that goes across the connectors themselves. Normally on the newer airbag stuff, there's a little orange clip that you have to clip outward first, a little orange bar that goes across, and then you can unclip those. So on these, you can just kind of reach in and grab them. And again, we do have our truck battery disconnected at this point, and it has been disconnected for several minutes to allow everything to kind of drain so there's no residual electrical charge in the system. So what I'm going to do next is, and I'm just comparing the, let's do this first. Let's get the Christmas tree clip undone from the airbag up there at the top, and we'll get those 2 electrical connections done. They're color coded, so when they go back in, they only go back into, you'll make sure you get them in the right spot. And what that is that your primary and secondary circuits that fire the squibs that then eventually deploy the airbag. But let me get that disconnected and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we've got our airbag disconnected, and we've got the airbag kind of sitting off to the side in a safe and secure location. Now we've got a clock spring inside of our assembly that allows us to have our multi-function push buttons on our steering wheel, but then allow you to obviously rotate the steering wheel to steer at the same time, and that clock spring is what's responsible for maintaining that electrical connection. And you can see that electrical connection for the steering wheel is right up here at the top, which is kind of what we need to see about getting out of there. So we need to disconnect that electrical, because various parts of this old steering wheel are going to migrate onto the new one. Now, just kind of comparing the internal makeup of this, it looks pretty close to what we got. There's the new one there. There's the old one there. You can see that there's provisions for what looks to be something right there, that long piece of metal coming down. It looks like some type of brace or something, which isn't on ours, but the opposite side little pin you see jutting there out on the side does match up with ours. So it looks like we've got the 2 screw holes at the top are there, and what I'm looking at are the 2 screw points there and there that the trim screw into, which are there and there on our old steering wheel. So what I'm going to work on next is getting the electrical. Looks like it's just a clip that we can just unplug that from the clock spring, and then we can see about breaking our bolt free, and then see what's going to take to get the steering wheel off of here. Now I don't see really any locations where you would normally screw in like a steering wheel puller, because there isn't really threaded areas around where the nut would be at. So we may just be able to break that free and kind of wiggle the steering wheel back and forth, and maybe use the strength of our knees if we need to help push on the back of the steering wheel to get that to come free. But one thing we will do when we get this bolt broke free is that what I want to do is just kind of mark on the inside an approximate location of where we're going to kind of take this off, because I don't see a master spline. Now, hold up, there may be a master spline on here. Yeah, I don't see a master. Well, there is a master spline. Okay, so it may be a little hard for you to see. Maybe if I got a shop light on it, it'd be a little bit better. But master spline is just going to make sure that we get the new steering wheel on in the same position as the old one. Maybe if I shine the light from underneath, yeah, you can see that spline right there in the center is a little bit wider than the remaining splines to the left or right. So that should be our master spline. And I'm going to look on the old steering wheel just to make sure that it's also master splined, because sometimes these steering wheels aren't. And obviously our steering wheel isn't perfectly straight, but if it's not master splined at all, then we'll just kind of have to hopefully get it to where it needs to be, and basically eyeball up where our old one's at and get the new one to be roughly in that same spot. It's pretty straight, as you can see there, but either way, I'm rambling on way too much. Let's get this electrical connector undone. Let's get this bolt out here, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. Well, we got our bolt broken free, and it did take an impact to get that to break free. That is Loctited in place, so keep that in mind. Now, you may be able to do it with a breaker bar, but, you know, I didn't want to put that much, you know, consistent force on this to try to break it. It's much easier to get that to break free with the impact. However, unfortunately, we did try to see if we could, you know, put some leverage behind the steering wheel and then kind of just grab and rock it from side to side, and it's on there too tight. And what I can see is remnants of what looks to be some of the Loctite that was used for the bolt. Looks like it may have gotten down inside the grooves, further holding this steering wheel in place. And what's supposed to happen, and you can get them, is that there's a steering wheel puller that goes into these square diagonal holes here and then pushes in on the bolt in the center. I've tried a couple of different pullers. I don't have one that will I don't have a 2-jawed puller that would do that to be able to get into these holes. I did try a 3-jaw to see if I could get underneath where the airbag comes in and kind of hook underneath, but it didn't give me the angle well enough to push in on the bolt. So I've done this. I've ordered a kit. I've ordered an OEM tools kit. We'll see how well it works when it gets here. It'll be tomorrow for me, but it'll be just a few moments for you. So that is where we sit. You can see that we've got our top trim removed, just in prep. We've got our electrical disconnected. We've got our airbag obviously disconnected, and our center bolt broken free. And we're just on hold waiting for a tool to arrive. So again, should be moments for you, maybe a day or so for me, but I'll bring you back as soon as we get that tool in, and we'll also turn this video into a tool evaluation as well. So with that being said, I will let you go, and I'll bring you back in a moment. Bye. And welcome back, and hopefully the wind noise doesn't intrude onto the camera here. I'll try to keep you out of the wind as much as I can. But as noted in the previous clip, just a couple moments for you, but a couple of days later for me. Took a little while to get our kit in here, about a day or so, and then we just got hammered with rain the following day, so a little bit of a delay. But where we left off on our steering wheel, if you recall in the previous clip, we removed our airbag and disconnected our electrical wiring here, and we got our main nut here cracked loose. And I just got it threaded back in a little bit into the steering wheel. Now we did try to get in here, as we saw in a couple of video examples, and just kind of rock the steering wheel back and forth to see if we could get it to break the taper that it was on, but to no avail. We couldn't get it to budge. I've also seen a couple of clips where individuals kind of just hit the steering wheel rather kind of not forcefully, but aggressive enough, just kind of hitting the steering wheel from side to side to also get it to break loose. You know, and I didn't want to take the chance of breaking something like the clock spring behind this. So that's when we decided to go ahead and just get the kit you see here. Now, either way, depending on how you want to do this, whether you use a puller or you just want to see if you can just kind of forcibly get the steering wheel to break free, when you're doing that, make sure you thread that bolt back in a little bit, that center bolt, just so when this steering wheel does pop free, it doesn't inadvertently grab like the airbag wiring here which comes through the clock spring. You don't want the steering wheel to potentially grab some of that wiring and kind of pull it out and, you know, break it where it goes into that clock spring. Otherwise, you'll be doing that replacement as well. But as promised, we picked up this kit here, which is an OEM Tools kit number 37182. And if you don't want to buy the kit, you can go to your local auto parts store. They may have one as well. But this wasn't too bad. I'll put a link in the description. This was about $49 for the kit you see here. And for this particular Chrysler, this is the adapter that we need. These little J-hook looking adapters, which will come down into here, kind of like, let's see here if we can get it like that. So you can see where they'll go into these square openings. And looks like it likes to kind of just, yeah, line itself up, at least in this case, pointing straight up. And it'll come in behind those squares and then just hook onto the steering wheel. And then we can use this piece here. So what will happen is these two J-hooks, if you want to call them that, one will be on each side. And then we'll take our center forcing screw, which will thread through our center block, and then push up against our center bolt here. That again, we just got this back in by a couple threads, and that should allow us to continue to pull our steering wheel off. So let me get this, and you can see the kit here also has the ability of removing the lock plate if you have to remove a lock plate. That some steering wheels have in order to get the locking mechanism out for the ignition, things of that nature. But let me get this kit set up and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see that we've got our puller in place with our J-hooks and our openings, our little square openings at the bottom. And we've got a little bit of the tension on our forcing screw, just kind of holding everything in place. Now, you can see these J-hooks are kind of long, so we may have enough throw left on the forcing screw that you see here, or we may have to put something underneath of it, like we have this right here that we can potentially put underneath that forcing screw, just to give us a little bit of extra foot, so to speak. And this just gives you something flat to kind of push against. And we can also back that center bolt out a little bit to kind of give us some extra height if we need it. But let's go ahead and try and see if we can at least get this steering wheel started to break free, and then I'll bring you back. I don't think I have a position I can get you into to try to hold you. Let me see if I could set you up on a mount, and so you can kind of see a little bit of this real time. One moment. And welcome back. So I just want to show you, I did end up putting that little cup on the bottom of that, and you can see it gives you quite a bit more thread up in here to do it that way. I don't have a good spot to kind of get you anchored where you can see this, because I kind of need to hold this with one hand while I'm tightening, because it's just on two kind of points you see here, and it kind of wants to pivot left and right. Based on where these hooks are at and the amount of downward force it's got to apply. So what I'm going to do is just kind of hold it stationary with one hand while I tighten with the other one until I get this to break free. Once I can get it to break free, I'll bring it back and I'll kind of show you where we're at with this. But that's the overall setup there. It's no different than any other puller. Again, we're going to support here. We're going to apply some downward force there, and that should pull the steering wheel this direction and hopefully get it to break off that taper. So one moment. And welcome back. So that did it. It took probably about 2 or 3 turns of the ratchet to get it to break free, but the steering wheel just kind of popped once it was broken free from that seat. Let me just get the J-hooks out of here. There we go. And And as you can see, we are now weeble wobbly. It wasn't in very tight. Like I said, once it got about probably about 2 turns into that screw and provided just enough of a downward force, you can see there that it popped free off that taper. And yes, you can see there, just to confirm what we were looking at earlier, you can see a master spline at the top there. So getting our new steering wheel to match up, as we were theorizing before, shouldn't be too bad of an issue, because we do have a master spline on the steering wheel and of course a master spline there. But yeah, not too terrible. It is something that if you do employ the other methods to break this free, which again was involved either putting pressure at the bottom of the steering wheel and kind of rocking the steering wheel left and right, or just, you know, giving it some good solid thuds left and right of the steering wheel like this while you apply pressure, you might be able to get it to break free that way. Again, just be mindful that, you know, you don't break, you know, something underneath of here, especially like this clock spring or you know, this turn signal switch, something along that nature. Again, so not too terrible. Like I said, the kit itself, I'll put a link in the description. I want to say it was about $49 and change for the kit. And as you can see, it gives you the adapters and pieces you need to do quite a few steering wheel pulls. And for the cost, it's actually not too bad of a thing to have, just to kind of keep around in case you have to do this again, or you have to do this again to multiple vehicles. But either way, I digress. Now that we have our prize, what we're going to do, we're going to take this and take this and you inside. We're going to work on the bench here, and we're going to get all of this hardware and plastic and wiring harnesses and other pieces of trim off of this steering wheel and migrate it onto the new one. So one moment. And welcome back. Well, I got you in the garage at this point. We're on the bench, and this is our factory steering wheel, as you can see here. And we're just going to work on taking the trim pieces off. Now, on this particular steering wheel, we don't have the shift paddles. And we also do not have the radio controls, which are sometimes mounted on the sides of the steering wheel. So we don't have those particular buttons or harness to worry about in this one. But what it looks like we have in the rear of the steering wheel, we've got a couple of Phillips down here at the bottom, and we've got a couple of Torx bits here at the top. And we've also got some additional fasteners that are on the other side of this steering wheel. So let's start with what we can see, because these plastic trim pieces is what we're going to have to migrate over to our new wheel. Now, our new wheel, as I said before, is, you know, quote unquote carbon fiber, at least in color and appearance. Now, they do make new trim pieces that you can get to match the steering wheel. I just chose not to do that in this case. Just going to reuse the trim pieces off this wheel. Looks like these rear Torx thread directly into the metal on the back of the steering wheel. So let me check the new one. Yeah, the new one's got the threaded spots on the back as well. So we've got the hardware. Let's make sure those Phillips screws are loose. Okay, they're loose. Yep, there goes one. There's the other one. And now inside of here, it looks like you've got the same thing. You've got two Phillips screws at the bottom of the steering wheel that screw one piece of plastic, the front plastic trim into the rear plastic trim, and you've got Torx at the top corners. So yeah, there's one Phillips. Looks like it's all the same hardware, same size screws. So they're, at least on this particular steering wheel, they're not any different. Why it's Phillips on the bottom and Torx on the top, I have no idea, but that is a T25 Torx. Okay, you can see our two pieces of the plastic are starting to separate now. So this is the front trim with our buttons on it. Now we want to be careful here because we want to sneak out this wiring harness that's underneath here that go to that control our side buttons. Let's see what we've got. Okay, so we need to get this piece, which is this is the connector to our side buttons that go in our clock spring. We've got to get it underneath wiring here for our horn button. We need to get it around that, and we should be able to kind of pull this out as one piece. Okay, so let me do that. Let me work on getting this wiring harness fished out of here, and I'll bring it back. One moment. And welcome back. So in the process of getting this harness out of here, it looks like it's going to be easier to remove the horn buttons. In this case, these four white kind of pillars that you see here, or these cups, these are your horn buttons. And on the back of the steering wheel, once you have this piece of trim loose enough, you can get to the little clips that you see right there to kind of squeeze those together, and that should get those buttons to pop out. So I'm going to work on that and bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So again, once you have those tabs kind of squeezed together on the back of these horn buttons, you can then push them through. And the reason why we wanted to get this out, at least on this steering wheel first, is that you can see these were blocking access to be able to get our wiring harness snuck around the top of our ears here to be able to get this upper piece of trim out of here. Now that we can unhook all of this, get our horn buttons out of the way. It looks like we've got one more connection point. It looks like goes underneath. Let's see here. Okay, yep, it ties into the, they've got it zip tied in here to the bottom horn buttons as well. So we got our bottom horn buttons undone. Looks like we got a zip tie that we need to cut right here at the bottom of the steering wheel to finish getting this out. So let me get that trimmed and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So to show you what it wasn't a zip tie. It was a little clip at the bottom, you can see right there, that had this electrical connector nestled down and pushed down on top of it, as well as this bundle of wire, again for our horns, pushed down on top of it. So once we get that all unclipped from this piece, we should be able to disconnect our wiring harness here and hopefully continue our disassembly. So let me get this connection block, which looks to be where our horn buttons electrically connect into our harness, which then ultimately comes out to that plug there and eventually hooks into the clock spring. So let me get this lower connector unclipped and I'll bring you back. One moment. Oh, and you can see, yes, our supervisor has shown up to critique the quality of our work. So one moment. And welcome back. So just take a little opportunity to clean up the inside of this trim while we're here, but this is kind of what we're left with. This is our lower trim. These are our horn buttons. Two upper, two lower. That's our assembly there. And then of course we have the front assembly here with our control buttons on it. So needless to say, if you're having issues with the cruise buttons or the navigation buttons or any buttons in general you may have on this trim, no better time than now to change them out while you got this assembly removed. So we're going to do a little bit more cleanup here, just get rid of some of this residual dirt, and then we'll look about getting this reassembled. But you can see our factory steering wheel here. And then of course you can see our replacement next to it. A little bit better of a comparison now that they've been stripped down to just the wheel itself. Again, factory here. And then what we're going over to here on the new one on the left here. And this is pretty, like I said, pretty spot on as far as the arrangement. It looks like this steering wheel also has an additional piece here to accommodate some items that we don't have, but no harm, no foul. That'll be covered up by the trim. We won't see it, but it does have the two mounting points here at the top for the trim piece screws, and it also accounts for the two screws here on the back for the trim as well. And the bottom looks the same as far as these 2 points here. Again, the only difference between this one, which is the aftermarket, and the factory one, is that the newer one, as you can see, it just has the flat bottom to it. So I'm going to work on getting some trim cleaned up here, and I'll bring it back, and we'll assemble some trim and get this steering wheel ready to reinstall. So one moment. And welcome back. So we're just getting our back piece of trim on, and everything lines up. Looks to be good. The bottom portions are lining up here so the screws can go through. The back trim lines up where we can get our back fasteners in. You may have to push like we did just a little bit to kind of get everything to fall into place, because again, it is a piece of trim from 2012 going on to a new steering wheel. So, things have shifted a little bit, but not too bad. It lines up fairly well. So we should be able to get our screws here in the back, and then we can flip it around and start putting our electrical pieces back in. Now, if you remember, we had Torx bits here at the top, 2 of them. Yep, threaded in beautifully, so they have the right thread pitch on the inside of this aftermarket wheel. And I'm looking for ones that didn't have white paint on them, in case you're curious. Not that it matters. It looks like it's the same Torx bits on the inside versus the outside, but since we took these off of the outside, I want to put them back on the inside. Now the bottom 2 Phillips we can't put in because they screw into the top piece of trim. So we can kind of do that last, but at least that'll hold our back trim on. So we can get our steering wheel flipped back around. And the first thing I think that we can do is, we've got a couple things here. We've got our horn buttons, which will push into place and lock back into the 4 rectangular holes that you see here, just like they did on the old factory one. And then we have our top wiring harness, which the way this was done on the factory one is that this one was actually underneath these 2. So what we may have to do is just do something like this. Tell you what, let's put our horn buttons off to the side for the time being. Let's get this down in here just loose, and that way we can press in our harness, get it in the same spot it was, and then we can kind of come behind ourselves and put our horn buttons back in. Because our horn button cabling, and we need to go this way with it, and I'll tell you what, I need to fix that. So I'm going to take the back trim off, because that loop of cabling that goes between the top and the bottom, they need to go underneath this metal bar that goes to the left-hand side of the steering wheel. And that'd be easier to do just to take that back trim off. Okay, so let me get this situated, and then I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So just to show you what I'm doing, I'm just going to place the horn buttons kind of where they need to go, and then we'll put the back cover on, flip it around, and get our wiring situated. So one moment. And welcome back. So you can see we got our horn buttons in, we got our wiring underneath here where it now belongs, our back cover is reattached. And before we press these into place, however, I want to get that top wiring harness that goes between the buttons pushed down into the guides it came out of. And one piece does go underneath here, but it's not too terrible. You can get that underneath. It's just that pigtail that connects the horn buttons into that connector. That'll fit underneath that right side there without having to take the back cover back off. So basically I want to get this wiring harness situated, and then we'll get our horn buttons pressed back in place, which again, which you can see there, they'll just snap back in, and then we'll go from there. So let me see if I can get you, I might be able to get you set up on a tripod. One moment. Okay, so I got you zoomed in a little bit, and this is probably way too much video for a simple steering wheel replacement, but in case you're like me and you haven't done this before and you're looking for a bit of detail, hopefully this gives you the detail that you need. So this is the pigtail here that would be on the right hand side. We're just going to go underneath this arm here on the left, I should say right. This is where it gets interesting, because we start to, I'll show you what I'm doing here once I can get that wire where it needs to be. Yeah, I'm gonna have to, yeah. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see that we've got our horn buttons just kind of laying off here to the side, but they do go underneath this bar here on the left. Now we got another wiring harness here on the right that needs to go underneath. Now the back cover, we went ahead and left the screws out because it's easier to get everything underneath and get all the wiring harnesses routed before we secure that back cover in place. So again, this was the electrical connector that allows the horn buttons to be able to plug into our clock spring. And all I'm doing right now is getting the buttons, the electrical connector for those horn buttons to connect in, routed here on the right hand side where it needs to go. I'll show you that here. See there, just goes underneath on the opposite side, just like the horn wiring did. Okay, then we can kind of start to get everything to fall into place and put our wiring back in the clips that it came out of. So a little bit of a jangle puzzle, a little bit of a loose, but it's just not too terrible. Just a matter of getting things where they belong. So we're going to remake this electrical connection here in this pigtail and get it pushed down back inside the holder here in the center, and eventually come around and get our horn buttons and everything clipped back in. But pretty much the wiring is the reversal of the removal. And I'm just going to, again, work on getting everything back in, get it pushed back down on the rear plastic clips that we took it out of, and I'll bring it back. One moment. Back. So we've kind of got wiring where it needs to be. Upper and lower, we've got a couple things to button up here. We went ahead and put the screws into the back cover to secure it, since we're done and got all the free play space we needed from the rear cover. And again, these horn relay buttons, or horn buttons, just line them back up and push them back into place. You'll hear that one snap in. All 4 of them should do that. You should hear them lock into place. There we go. And we got our lower ones back in already. We remade our electrical connection at the bottom, which again ties our horn buttons into our top connector here, which eventually goes into our clock spring. And you can see it's a little bit tight again, because you got to understand we're going into new material on this new steering wheel here. But you can see that our screw hole points, all 4 of them, do line up to where they need to be. So now what we can do is just put our screws into our top piece of trim and get this secured and ready for reinstall. So that's what I'm going to work on now, is making sure that we've got our wiring where it belongs. And it looks like it's pretty much all where it needs to be at this point as far as being back inside the clips on the trim. So let me get these 4 screws in. I'll bring you back. Remember, just like the back cover, there are Torx on the top, Phillips on the bottom, and then we'll reverse this and get the 2 Phillips screws put back on the bottom of this trim as well. So one moment. Okay, we are reassembled to the point we are ready to put the steering wheel back on the vehicle. I did have some issues with some of these lower Phillips screws on this side. Again, it's old plastic and it's been threaded into plastic, so they kind of didn't want to tighten up. They're a little bit wore out, so I just shoved a little extra material in there. In this case, just some cut up pieces of tie wrap, just to give it some extra material to bite onto, which seems to be holding it for now. If we ever have to redo this steering wheel again, we'll have to order a new back piece of trim, but for now we'll be fine. I think we'll be good with what we got, because remember, we've got these 2 top screws supporting it as far as this top piece of trim, and then you still have the 2 Phillips screws which come in from underneath to also support it as well. But like I said, it's tight now. It's just something to be mindful of, that when you're working with plastics this old, and especially metal screws that are just screwing in the plastic, it doesn't take much to wear things out. And if you do like I did, and you go to take these out and put them back in and they're already kind of worn out, you may have to come up with something to help those tighten up a little bit, or just replace this back piece of trim. Either way, let's go ahead and bring this out to the vehicle, and then we'll look at our next task in this video before we actually go to reinstall this, and that is to replace the boot on the column shifter. I did some research on that, and I think I've got a game plan of how we can go ahead and get that done. But let me bring you back in a moment. And welcome back. You can hear that springs in the air, if you could hear all the bird chatter behind me. So we're back in the cab of our truck, and we're looking at getting the shifter boot changed out. And there is another, trying to get this lower cover off so we can take a look at a couple of things. There's another T15 bolt, at least on this model, right here in this center part. And then if we come over here to where our shift lever is at to move our steering wheel up and down, you can kind of see they have a little bit of a cutout there that you should be able to shimmy this cover off. So there it goes right there. Well, not the way I wanted to take that down, but it is out of there. And from what I could see online, we have an electrical connection which you can see right here, at least on this model. It comes down this way, comes over here, and then plugs into this plug here. And we have an E-Torx screw right here. And what it looks like we can do is just take this E-Torx screw out, undo this fitting here. Sorry, this Christmas tree clip for the cable here, and undo our cable here in order to see about getting the new shift boot in place. Now, it looks like that's a pretty good sized connector on that. We may have to de-pin that connector, get the boot through, and then re-pin it, because I don't think we're going to get the stretch needed to get it over here without damaging the boot. So we'll have to see. Yeah, I think that's going to be the route we got to take, because yeah, there was nothing in the book, in case you're curious on this, about this particular procedure for replacing this torn boot. By knowing it was torn when it went in for the recall, if they would have said something, because they actually replaced this shifter assembly for a safety recall, if they'd have told me this boot was torn, I'd have told them to replace it while they had it. Either way, okay. Let me get that electrical disconnected, get this Christmas tree clip out of here, get this E-Torx out of here, and that should allow us to remove our shifter lever from our assembly, and then we'll see what we got to deal with from that point forward. So again, that's going to be an E-Torx, and I'll be right back. One moment. And welcome back. So this is an E10 Torx, or an E10 for the Torx bit, sorry. This does kind of pinch down on the shifter arm, and you can see we're getting it out, but you kind of have to wiggle it to get it out of that position. Just again, be mindful when you're wiggling this. You don't want to put too much force on it, because if that all of a sudden just gives, you don't want to damage the wire that goes up into that. So we're just going to continue to kind of wiggle and get this out of here, and then I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we got our new boot onto our shifter. We did have to de-pin the connector and just feed the wiring through, and then just re-pin it. Now you might be able to squeeze the end of that shifter boot in case you have to do this over that connector. I mean, it is pretty flexible. It may have that much give to it, but it's also easier because we have the de-pinning kit here, just to kind of de-pin the connector and re-pin it. But installation is going to be reverse removal, so we're going to get that back in there, get its lock pin back in. And this does have a stop on it, in case you're curious. You can see where the flat part stops right there, as far as depth into the transmission shifter itself. So like I said, we're going to get this reinstalled and get the lower cover back on, get things prepped to put the steering wheel back on, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we just started to get our steering wheel on. We've got the bolt in. We haven't started pressing it in place yet, because I want to tell you, it does have a master spline on it, as we saw in the previous clip, so it helps you get it on the alignment on correctly. But to make sure that we were lined up, I took a silver Sharpie and marked on the post coming out of the steering column where the master spline was, and then I also put a silver dot on the steering wheel location as well, and that way it gave me another visual reference to know that I had the master spline and the steering wheel lined up with the master spline on the shaft of the steering column. Again, just another little visual aid, and you'll feel it kind of fall into place a little bit as you get it there. And it looks to be just enough meat on that bolt that we could start to use the bolt to help draw this on. Now I'm going to draw this on nice and slow, make sure that we got, you know, our alignment right where it needs to be. And once I get this done, I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So once we got a couple of turns in our bolt, and verified that we were seating correctly, I went ahead and hit it with a couple very, very light ugga-duggas just to finish drawing it the rest of the way in and put some torque on our fastener. I also went ahead and put our upper clamshell back in, so it's reattached to our lower. And you can see our new shifter bolt here, which just snaps in place and snaps into the top and lower covers on this side. So yeah, it's a cosmetic fix is what this shifter boot is, but it, you know, looks a lot nicer than, you know, what it did before. Once I can get that wrinkle out of there we go. And what we have left is just putting the airbag in. And remember, on the airbag we had the Christmas tree clip connector up here, and then we had our two color-coded connectors here, which correspond with our airbag module here. See, we got an orange and a black, which will coincide with orange and black. So what we're going to do is get those connectors in, and then once we get those connectors attached, I'll bring you back and I'll just show you the airbag should just seat back down in here, push in place, and it should grab a hold of these three mounting points you see here, which will grab a hold of the loops you see here. That's what we were doing earlier in the video, as I was showing you when we were taking the airbag out. So let me get the airbag wiring reattached, and I'll bring you back. One moment. Okay, so we got airbag wiring reattached, and we should just be able to take the airbag at this point, push it back down. There we go. It's reseated. We got our horn. Yep, I can feel it springing back. That's good. Now what we'll do is that we'll go ahead and reattach our battery power, verify that our horn works. We'll go ahead and start it, make sure that it can see us looking for input on all our buttons. And then we'll wrap it up by putting our bottom kick panel back on. But as you can see there, much better upgrade and improvement over what we had in there stock. Like I said, I like it. I will put a link in the description to where I got this on eBay. As you saw in the video, at least for this 2012, it worked out just fine. You just have to be mindful that when you order these, that you do as they instruct. You send them a picture of your existing steering wheel. You let them know whether you have paddle shifters or not, and you also have to let them know whether you have a heated steering wheel option or not. But either way, I'm rambling on. Cover that more towards the end of the video. Meanwhile, let me get the battery reattached, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we got our battery reattached. I'm just going to turn it to the on position first. And the first thing I'm looking for is to see if we've got any residual airbag lights. Good, the airbag light just went out. That's good. That means we're not having any type of electrical issue with our connector here. And I don't know if I mentioned it in the previous clip. I believe I did. Just make sure that you plug your clock spring connector back in, which is the electrical for your buttons. Otherwise, your buttons won't work. And we can see that we can select items on our display. So those set of buttons are working. Now, let's try the horn. Good, yep, that works. Beautiful. Still no airbag light. Now let's go ahead and start it up and see if our cruise control buttons work. Now that we're running, beautiful. Hopefully you can see that there. That cruise control emblem is turning on and off. You can see we got 80 pounds of oil pressure, cold start. Beautiful, love it. Yep, working like a top. Nothing binding, everything rotates. Awesome. And you can see we can, well, we gotta have our foot on the brake in order to test that, but let's go ahead and test our shifter. One moment, let me get my foot in here. Yep, you can see we can go into reverse, come back up in the park, so no issues with our shifter there. All of our lights are still out. Beautiful. Okay, go ahead and shut this down. Okay, awesome. So now that we verified that, we verified everything works, we verified our fitment is okay, we're not seeing any problems with the electrical side of it. Let me go ahead and get this lower kick panel back on, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. As you can still hear, spring is in the air. So awesome. With that being said, I know it was more kind of cosmetic repairs in this video, but it was a couple items that needed to be done. And the steering wheel is a bit more cosmetic. And as I was alluding to in the earlier clip, you'll notice on this one, as opposed to factory, you got places, you got thumb grips. You got thumb grips here, the other side. Down below, you can also kind of grip it this way, which is the reason for the steering wheel being flat. Because once again, the goal is to start taking it to the track and doing some track times. So to be able to have the extra, grip to give you the extra control over the steering wheel versus the factory one, plus it went ahead and fix the issue we were having up here with the old factory steering wheel disintegrating. It's more of also, at least in my mind, kind of a safety upgrade as well. Anyway, with that being said, hopefully you found this video useful. As for the status of this truck, we are still waiting to finish our break-in procedures. So once again, I apologize for the delay in content. We have to get the break-in done before we start doing anything, more aggressive with it. We need about another 110 more miles on it. We'll be at 300. I originally was going to do a 500-mile break-in, but considering all the break-in work that we've been doing, getting log files to the tuner, in other words, varying the speed limit, driving highway, driving city, doing a bunch of mixing, I think 300 miles will do the same job for us. So we need about another 120 miles. Then we could do the break-in oil change, and then we can look in getting our wideband O2 sensor in, and then start getting more data into our tuner. So we're getting there. We definitely have some more content coming on this vehicle as far as the performance upgrades, aka the going from the 355 gears to the 410 gears in the rear. It's just going to take us some time to get there because, again, we have to take things in order that we need to take them in. First being, again, completing the break-in and getting the tune situated. So with that being said, hopefully you found this video useful. If you have subscribed already, I think each and every one of you, our goal is to hit 3,000 subscribers by the end of the year. If you have not subscribed, please consider doing so. And once again, I will put links in the description for the steering wheel, the Torx set that I am using, as well as the part number for the replacement shifter boot that we used over here on the side. Again, not a bad job to do. Just take your time with it, mind your P's and Q's, so to speak, and as you can see, it can be done, and again, my opinion, looks quite nice. And with that being said, I will let you go, and I'll bring you back for the next one. Thank you much. Bye.